The leather of my office chair sighed as I leaned back. The cityscape spread before me like a glittering testament to human ambition. 40 floors below, ant-like figures scurried along sidewalks, unaware that the woman in the corner office with the modest suits and sensible shoes commanded a salary that could purchase their entire apartment buildings. $40,000 monthly. The number still sometimes startled me when I saw it on deposit slips, not because of its magnitude, but because of the profound disconnect between that figure and the life I intentionally lived. My intercom buzzed, a discreet chirp that pulled me from my reverie. "Miss Sterling, the Shanghai call in 5 minutes," my assistant reminded me. "Thank you, Anya. I'm ready." I stood, smoothing my simple navy skirt, purchased 3 years ago from a discount chain, tailored perfectly by a neighborhood seamstress for $20. The paradox amused me. The woman who negotiated 8-figure contracts while wearing $80 shoes. But that was the point, wasn't it? The separation between who I was and what I did had been my armor, my philosophy, my gift to my son. Marcus. His face floated in my mind as I prepared for the call, his earnest brown eyes so like his father's, the way his brow furrowed when he concentrated, the cautious optimism that had characterized him since childhood. At 35, he was a man now, married, building a life, and he had no idea who his mother truly was. The phone conference lasted 90 minutes. I switched between Mandarin and English effortlessly, navigating the complexities of a joint venture that would affect 3,000 employees across 2 continents. My team in Shanghai respected me, feared me a little perhaps, but they listened. When I spoke, billion-dollar decisions shifted direction. The power was real, tangible, and I wielded it with the same quiet precision with which I cooked dinner in my small apartment kitchen. After the call, I remained at my desk, the winter light fading to bruised purple outside. My calendar showed nothing until morning. Anya had gone home. The office was silent except for the faint hum of climate control. This was my life. These hours of immense responsibility, followed by the quiet subway ride home to my unassuming neighborhood. I bought groceries from the same market where cashiers called me dear, where I clipped coupons and compared prices. I attended community board meetings. I volunteered at the library literacy program on Saturdays. To my neighbors, I was Alara, quiet, kind, possibly struggling financially, but always dignified. The deception wasn't malicious, it was deliberate. After Marcus's father vanished 2 months before our son was born, leaving nothing but a note about not being ready, I made 2 vows. First, that I would never depend on a man for survival. Second, that my son would learn the value of things, not their price. And so began the dual life. By day, I climbed, from secretary to executive assistant to junior analyst to manager to director, and finally to the role I now held, regional director of operations for Valerian International, overseeing Asia-Pacific and North American divisions. The journey took 23 years of 70-hour weeks, of studying after putting Marcus to bed, of learning finance from library books, of mastering languages through cassette tapes played while cooking. By night, I was simply Marcus's mom. We lived in a 1-bedroom apartment where he got the bedroom and I slept on a pull-out sofa. We ate simple meals. We went to free museums on Sundays. We borrowed books instead of buying them. When he asked why we didn't have a car like his friends, I told him the subway was more interesting. When he wondered why I never dated, I said I had everything I needed. And the money? It piled up in investments, in conservative stocks, in real estate purchased through discreet trusts, in art bought at auction under pseudonyms. My net worth approached $20 million, but my lifestyle screamed lower middle class. I never lied to Marcus. I simply never offered the truth. When he asked about my job, I said, office work. When he wondered about my education, I said, I took some classes. He formed his own conclusions, and I let him. The phone on my desk rang, startling me from my thoughts. The caller ID showed Marcus's name. I smiled, picking up. Hello, darling. Mom? His voice sounded strained, tight. How are you? I'm well, just finishing up at the office. I glanced at the clock, 6:47 p.m. Is everything all right? A pause. the kind of pause that precedes uncomfortable conversations. Simone's parents are here, from Switzerland. Ah, I kept my tone neutral. I'd met Simone's parents exactly once at the wedding 18 months earlier. The interaction was brief, polite, and utterly revealing. Franklin and Veronica Beaumont wore their wealth like armor, assessing everyone and everything with the cold calculation of auctioneers. Their first visit since the wedding, yes. First time in the country, actually, Marcus said. They want to have dinner with you. Another pause, heavier this time. Of course, I said. I'd be happy to see them. Saturday night, at Le Jardin Bleu. He named the restaurant, and something cold trickled down my spine. Le Jardin Bleu wasn't just expensive, it was ostentatiously exclusive, the kind of place where the tasting menu cost more than most people's monthly rent, where reservations required connections rather than mere money. I see, I said slowly. That's quite a place. Simone's parents chose it, Marcus said quickly, defensively. They're staying at the Laurentian, you know, the hotel with the— Yes, I know the Laurentian, I cut him off gently. The hotel where suites started at $1,500 a night. What time should I be there? 8. But Mom— He trailed off. Yes, darling? Another hesitation. They're very particular people, you know, like traditional. They have certain expectations. The subtext hung between us, palpable even over the phone line. Don't embarrass me. Don't show up as yourself. Perform something acceptable. Marcus, I said, my voice carefully even, what exactly did you tell them about me? Silence. Then the truth, dragged out like a confession. I told them you work in an office, administrative stuff, that you live modestly, that you're simple. The word landed like a physical blow. Simple. Not humble, not frugal, not unpretentious. Simple. As in uncomplicated, unsophisticated, perhaps even simple-minded. I see, I said again. Mom, I didn't mean it like— It's fine, Marcus. My voice was calm, the same tone I used when a junior executive was about to cry during a performance review. I'll be there at 8 on Saturday, Le Jardin Bleu. I can send a car if you— I'll take a taxi. Good night, darling. I hung up before he could respond, my hand resting on the receiver for a long moment. Outside, the city lights had blossomed fully, a false constellation against the deepening dark. Simple. For 35 years I had curated this existence, the modest apartment, the careful budgeting, the invisible wealth, all of it a conscious choice to give my son the gift of authentic struggle, of earned achievement. And now that choice had transformed me, in his eyes and the eyes of his new family, into something to be managed, contained, apologized for. A slow anger began to burn in my chest, not hot and wild, but cold and precise, the same focused energy I channeled during hostile takeover negotiations. I stood and walked to the window, pressing my forehead against the cool glass. They wanted to meet the simple mother, the modest office worker, the woman who could be impressed by a fancy restaurant and intimidated by wealthy in-laws? Very well, but they would meet her on my terms. The next 3 days unfolded with eerie normalcy. I led meetings, approved budgets, fired an executive in Singapore for ethical violations, and negotiated a labor dispute in our Mexican factories. The power thrummed through my days, a constant current beneath the surface of my modest exterior. On Thursday evening, I visited my apartment building's basement storage unit, a small, dusty space that held the artifacts of my double life. Here, in unmarked boxes, lived the evidence of my other existence: financial records, property deeds, awards from corporate galas where I wore gowns worth more than my car. But tonight, I wasn't looking for evidence of wealth. I was looking for the opposite. In a corner, beneath an old winter coat, I found what I sought: a garment bag from a thrift store, purchased 5 years earlier for a community theater production where I'd played a struggling widow. Inside hung the perfect costume. The dress was shapeless gray polyester, faded at the elbows and hem, with a small stain near the collar that even dry cleaning hadn't fully removed. I paired it with scuffed, low-heeled pumps whose soles were worn smooth. From my own closet, I selected undergarments with fraying elastic, stockings with a barely perceptible run. The final touch was the handbag, a canvas tote from a long-defunct bookstore, its handles reinforced with mismatched thread where they'd begun to tear. On Saturday afternoon, I stood before my bedroom mirror and transformed. I washed my face and applied no makeup, leaving the faint age lines around my eyes and mouth exposed. I pulled my hair, which usually carefully styled, into a severe, greasy-looking ponytail. I even rubbed a little dust from a houseplant on my collar, the subtlest hint of carelessness. The reflection that stared back was a masterpiece of calculated impoverishment. This wasn't a poor woman trying to look rich. This was a poor woman who had stopped trying altogether. The shoulders slooped just so. The eyes held just the right mixture of weariness and timid hope. The hands, I made sure to briefly clean the bathroom without gloves to roughen them slightly. I looked, in a word, simple. My phone chimed with a text from Marcus. "Looking forward to tonight, Mom. The address is 77 East 65. Don't be late." The instruction, "Don't be late," was another tiny paper cut, as if I, who had built a career on precision, might forget such a basic courtesy. I replied with a simple, "See you at 8." Then I sat on the edge of my bed and waited. The apartment was quiet, filled with the golden hour light that slanted through my west-facing windows. In this light, the shabbiness of my chosen furnishings looked like poverty rather than aesthetic choice. The mismatched chairs, the second-hand sofa, the lack of artwork except for Marcus's childhood drawings framed in dollar store frames, it all told a story of struggle. And it was all a lie. A comfortable, intentional lie, but a lie nonetheless. At 7:15, I called for a taxi, not a black car service. I had accounts with all the luxury services, but a regular yellow cab. The driver who arrived looked tired, his eyes meeting mine in the rearview mirror with the blank disinterest of someone who'd seen too many fares. "Le Jardin Bleu," I said, my voice slightly quavery, unsure. He raised an eyebrow but nodded. "Fancy place?" "I'm meeting my son," I offered, the proud but nervous mother. "Good for you," he said without conviction, merging into traffic. As we drove through the gathering dusk, I watched the city transform from my working-class neighborhood to the glittering corridors of extreme wealth. The shift was abrupt, bodegas and laundromats giving way to designer boutiques and private galleries, the sidewalks emptying of ordinary people and filling with those who moved with the entitled grace of ownership. My heart beat a steady, calm rhythm. This wasn't anxiety, it was anticipation, the same feeling I got before a major negotiation when I knew I held the stronger position but let the other side believe otherwise. The taxi pulled up to Le Jardin Bleu precisely at 7:55. The restaurant occupied a converted townhouse, its facade glowing with discreet golden light. A doorman in white gloves and tails stood sentry, his expression carefully neutral as he surveyed the arriving guests. I paid the driver with exact change, counting out wrinkled bills with deliberate slowness. He accepted them with a grunt, already looking past me to his next fare. As I stepped onto the curb, the doorman's eyes swept over me. I saw the instant assessment, the thrift store dress, the worn shoes, the cheap bag. His lips tightened almost imperceptibly. "Good evening," he said, the words frosty. "I'm here to meet my son," I said, letting my voice waver just slightly. "The reservation is under Beaumont." His eyes flickered with something, recognition, dismay, before he nodded and opened the massive oak door. "Right this way." The interior was exactly as I'd imagined. Low lighting, hushed conversations, the clink of crystal, the scent of money and privilege. The maitre d', a slender man with silver eyes and eyes like chips of ice, approached. His smile was professional, but his gaze was already dismissing me. "The Beaumont party?" I asked before he could speak. "Yes," he said, the single word laden with unasked questions. "Follow me." He led me through the dining room. Every table was occupied by people who looked like they'd been bred for this environment. Women in couture, men with watches worth more than cars, all speaking in the low, confident tones of those who've never been told no. And then I saw them. Marcus stood first, his face a mask of conflicting emotions. Relief that I'd arrived, yes, but beneath it, a profound discomfort. He wore a suit I didn't recognize, navy, impeccably tailored, probably a gift from his in-laws. It fit him perfectly, and yet he looked like a boy playing dress-up. "Mom," he said, coming forward to kiss my cheek. His lips were cold. "You made it." "Of course," I said, smiling my timid smile. Simone rose more slowly. She was beautiful in a sharp, polished way, cheekbones that could cut glass, honey-colored hair straightened to perfection, a cream-colored dress that hugged her slender frame. Her smile was tight, her eyes avoiding mine. "Mother-in-law," she said, the title formal, distant. She gestured to the table. "These are my parents, Franklin and Veronica Beaumont." They didn't stand. Veronica Beaumont was a study in calculated elegance, emerald green silk, diamonds at her throat and wrists, hair swept into a chignon so severe it looked painful. Franklin was his wife's counterpart, silver-haired, tanned, wearing a suit that probably cost 5 figures. A watch glittered on his wrist, a Patek Philippe that signaled not just wealth, but knowledge of what signaled wealth. "Ilara," Veronica said, her voice melodic but empty, like wind chimes made of ice. "How lovely to finally meet properly." She extended a hand, not to shake but to be taken. I obliged, feeling her cold, dry fingers barely press against mine before withdrawing. Franklin offered a nod. "A pleasure." The table was set for 5, with me placed at the far end, isolated. No one pulled out my chair. I sat carefully, arranging my worn dress around me, placing my canvas tote on the floor like a shameful secret. And so it began. The waiter appeared instantly, a young man with anxious eyes who clearly recognized this table as important. He presented menus bound in leather, the pages thick and creamy, the text in flowing French script. I opened mine and let my face fall into confusion. I stared at the words as if they were hieroglyphs, my brow furrowing, my lips moving slightly as I attempted to sound them out. Veronica watched over the top of her menu, a faint smile playing on her lips. "The menu is in French, of course," she said, as if explaining something to a child. "Would you like assistance?" "Oh, yes, please," I said, my voice small. I don't really understand." "How charming," Veronica murmured, though her tone suggested the opposite. She beckoned the waiter. "We'll order for the table. For Madame Sterling," she paused, considering me as one might consider a stray animal. "Perhaps the chicken, simple, unadorned, something she'll recognize." The waiter nodded, scribbling. "And to drink?" Veronica asked, looking at me. Water is fine. Just water? Franklin interjected, his first direct words to me. We're having wine, a 2015 Domaine della Romani Conti. You should try it. When will you have another opportunity? The condescension was thick. I could taste it, metallic and sour. Franklin, Veronica said with false gentleness, not everyone appreciates fine wine. It's an acquired taste. She turned to me. Perhaps a glass of the house red. It's quite approachable. I don't want to be any trouble, I whispered. No trouble at all, Veronica said, her smile not reaching her eyes. The first course arrived, amuse-bouches so tiny they seemed like a joke. Veronica explained each ingredient with the patient condescension of a docent. Truffle foam, that's the black speckles. Caviar from sustainable farms, so important to be ethical, don't you think? Gold leaf, entirely edible, of course. I ate mine in one nervous bite, missing the intended experience entirely. Veronica and Franklin exchanged a look. So, Ilara, Veronica began as we waited for the next course, Marcus tells us you work in an office. That's right, I said, keeping my eyes on my plate. Administrative work, filing, typing, you know. Of course, Veronica said smoothly. All jobs are dignified. Even the simplest tasks contribute. The word again, simple. Thank you, I murmured. And how long have you been with this company? Almost 20 years, I said truthfully. 20 years? Franklin's eyebrows raised. That's commendable loyalty. It's a steady job, with benefits. Benefits are important, agreed Veronica. Especially at your age, medical costs can be so burdensome. The conversation continued in this vein, a delicate dance of humiliation disguised as polite inquiry. They asked about my apartment, and I described it in terms that emphasized its smallness, its age, its modesty. They asked about my hobbies, and I said I enjoyed watching television and walking in the park. With each answer, I felt Marcus shrink beside me. He interjected occasionally, trying to steer the conversation to safer ground, his work, Simone's job, their plans, but Veronica effortlessly redirected back to me, to my inadequacies. The main courses arrived. Mine was indeed chicken, a pale, lonely breast with a drizzle of sauce, while the others had sculpted plates of seafood and beef that looked more like architecture than food. Veronica cut into her steak with surgical precision. Kobe beef, she informed me. Wagyu cattle massaged daily, fed beer, $80 an ounce. But when you understand quality, you understand the value. I nodded, chewing my chicken slowly. It's very good. You're easily pleased, Franklin observed, not unkindly, but with the clinical interest of an anthropologist observing primitive customs. That must make life simpler. Franklin, Veronica chided gently, but her eyes sparkled with approval. The wine flowed, loosening tongues. Veronica began to speak more freely about their lives, their villa in Geneva, their apartment in Paris, their yacht moored in Monaco. She mentioned sums casually, $100,000 for renovations, $50,000 for a charity gala, $20,000 for a handbag. And Simone, Veronica said, reaching across to pat her daughter's hand, has always had the best schools, the best travel, the best opportunities. We believe in investing in our children. She looked at me pointedly. Marcus is a wonderful young man, she continued. We were surprised when Simone chose him, given his background, but love works in mysterious ways. The insult was so beautifully crafted it almost glittered. I did my best with him, I said softly. Of course you did, Veronica said, her tone implying the opposite. Single motherhood is so challenging, especially without resources. The waiter cleared the plates. Dessert menus appeared. Veronica ordered something with a French name that involved liquid nitrogen and edible flowers. For me, she suggested the fruit plate, light, healthy, not too rich. As we waited, Veronica's demeanor shifted. She set her wine glass down with deliberate care and folded her hands on the tablecloth. Ilara, I hope you don't mind, but there's something we'd like to discuss as a family. I felt rather than saw Marcus tense beside me. Simone looked down at her lap. Of course, I said, my voice barely audible. Veronica leaned forward slightly. We love Marcus, truly. He's become like a son to us, and we want only the best for him and Simone. She paused, choosing her words with the care of a bomb disposal expert. But we worry, as parents do. Worry? I asked innocently. About stability, Franklin interjected. Financial, emotional. They're building a life together. It requires focus, energy, resources. And you, Veronica continued smoothly, are part of Marcus's life, of course, but at your age, with your limited means, well, it's natural for Marcus to worry about you, to feel responsible. The trap was closing. I could see its jaws in her carefully sympathetic expression. I don't want to be a burden, I whispered. Oh, no one's saying you're a burden, Veronica said quickly, though that was exactly what she was saying. But we're practical people, and we've thought of a solution. She glanced at Franklin, who nodded. We'd like to offer you a monthly allowance, nothing extravagant, but enough to make your life more comfortable. $500, perhaps $700, depending on need. That would ease Marcus's mind, allow him to focus on his marriage. The bribe hung in the air, ugly and naked. And in exchange, Franklin added, we'd simply ask for your cooperation. Give the young people space. Don't make unreasonable demands. Let them build their lives without complications. I looked at Marcus. His face was pale, his jaw clenched. He opened his mouth to speak, but Veronica raised a hand. Let your mother think, Marcus. This is an adult conversation. The silence stretched. Around us, the restaurant hummed with the quiet music of privilege. Crystal chimed against crystal. Soft laughter bubbled from nearby tables. And at our table, a woman who'd built an empire from nothing was being offered alms to disappear from her son's life. I picked up my napkin, daubed my lips, set it down. I took a sip of water. I let the moment build until the pressure was almost physical. Then I spoke. My voice was different now, not timid, not small. It was the voice I used in boardrooms when ending careers. That's a fascinating offer, Veronica. She blinked, sensing the shift but not yet understanding its magnitude. I'm glad you think so, she said cautiously. I do, I said, but I have questions for clarity. Of course. I leaned forward slightly, my posture shifting from defeated to commanding. The transformation was subtle but complete. This allowance, would it be adjusted for inflation, or is $700 in perpetuity? Veronica's phrase froze. We hadn't discussed. And the terms, I continued, as if she hadn't spoken, define unreasonable demands. Would calling my son twice a week be unreasonable? Would attending family holidays? Or do you envision something more comprehensive, say geographical distance? Perhaps I should relocate. I hear the Midwest is affordable. Franklin frowned. Now see here. No, Franklin, I said, my voice cutting through his like a blade. The temperature at the table dropped 10 degrees. Marcus stared at me as if seeing me for the first time. Simone's mouth was slightly open. I appreciate your concern for Marcus's stability, I said, my tone conversational, almost pleasant. And you're right, stability is important, which is why I've ensured he has it. Veronica recovered first, her voice sharp. I'm not sure what you mean. I mean, I said, that the down payment you made on their house, the $40,000, I paused, letting the number hang. I matched it through a discreet trust. Their mortgage is half what they think it is. Simone gasped. Marcus's eyes widened. The honeymoon, the $15,000 trip through Europe, I paid for the upgrades, first-class flights, suite upgrades, the private guides. They thought it was a wedding gift from a family friend. That was me. Veronica's face was turning an unpleasant shade of pink. "That's impossible. Marcus would have known." "Marcus knows what I allowed him to know," I said gently, "just as you know only what I allowed you to know tonight." Franklin found his voice. "What are you saying?" I smiled, a real smile now, cold and sharp. "I'm saying this performance, this pathetic broke mother you've been patronizing all evening, was exactly that, a performance." I reached for my canvas tote, the shabby bag they'd been sneering at all night. From its depths, I withdrew a small leather folder. I opened it and removed a single card, sliding it across the tablecloth toward Veronica. It was black, matte, with silver lettering that caught the light. Elara Sterling, Regional Director of Operations, Valerian International. Beneath my name was a number, a direct line to my office, and in the corner, the Valerian logo, a stylized V that was recognizable to anyone in global business as one of the most powerful corporate entities in the world. Veronica stared at the card as if it were a poisonous insect. Her hand trembled slightly as she picked it up. "Valerian," she whispered. "Yes," I said. "I oversee the Asia, Pacific, and North American divisions. My annual compensation package is just under $500,000, with bonuses that typically double that. I've held this position for 18 years. The math hung in the air, inevitable and devastating. "That's," Franklin began, then stopped, his financial brain automatically calculating. "That's $40,000 a month, minimum." "Often more," I agreed pleasantly. "The bonuses are quite generous." The silence this time was absolute. At nearby tables, people continued their conversations, unaware that a small universe had just collapsed at table 7. Marcus found his voice first, choked and broken. "Mom, why didn't you... How could you not tell me?" I turned to him, my expression softening. "Because I wanted you to build your own life, Marcus, not one handed to you, not one measured by my success. I wanted you to struggle, to achieve, to value what you earned, just as I did." "But all those years," he whispered, "the tiny apartment, the second-hand clothes, the coupons." "Choices," I said firmly, "every one of them. The apartment is rent-controlled, yes, but I own the building, through a trust. Your childhood friends, their families paid me rent." Marcus looked as if he'd been struck. Simone had tears streaming down her face, though whether from shock or shame, I couldn't tell. Veronica finally spoke, her voice thin and reedy. "This is outrageous. You deceived us. You made fools of us." "No," I said calmly, "you made fools of yourselves. I merely provided the opportunity." I let that sink in, watching as the realization dawned in their eyes. Every condescending comment, every veiled insult, every patronizing explanation had been heard, cataloged, and judged by a woman who could buy and sell them 10 times over. Veronica's composure shattered. "You planned this! You wanted to humiliate us!" "I wanted to know who you were," I corrected, "and now I do, as do Marcus and Simone." I turned to my daughter-in-law. "Simone, look at me." She raised her tear-streaked face. "Your parents offered me $700 a month to disappear from my son's life. They assessed my value, set a price, and made an offer. That's who they are. The question is, who are you?" Simone shook her head, words failing her. Marcus stood abruptly, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. Several diners glanced over, then quickly looked away, the wealthy instinct to avoid a scene. "Mom," he said, his voice trembling with emotion, "can we go, please?" "Not yet," I said. "There's one more thing." I reached into my bag again and withdrew another card. This one was transparent, made of brushed titanium, with no visible numbers or names until it caught the light at a certain angle. The American Express Centurion card, the black card that made Veronica's platinum seem like children's play money. I placed it on top of the check that had appeared sometime during the conversation. "The dinner is on me," I said. "Consider it a lesson in hospitality. When you invite someone to a meal, you should be prepared to welcome them as they are, not as you wish them to be." Veronica stared at the transparent card as if it were a holy relic. Her hand actually twitched toward it before she caught herself. "You can't," she began, then stopped, realizing she had no idea what I could or couldn't do. The waiter appeared, drawn by the tension. "Is everything—" "Everything is perfect," I said, handing him the Centurion card. "Please run this for the bill with a 25% gratuity, and bring me the receipt to sign." The waiter's eyes widened slightly at the card, but his training held. "Of course, madam." As he retreated, Franklin made one last attempt at salvaging his dignity. "Even with your resources, this doesn't change the family dynamics. We're still Simone's parents. We'll still be in their lives." "You will," I agreed, "but not in the same way, because now Marcus knows what you think of his mother, and, more importantly, he knows what you think of people you believe are beneath you." I looked at Veronica, holding her gaze until she flinched away. "You spent the entire evening trying to impress me with things that can be bought, the wine, the food, the jewelry, the travel, but you never once asked a real question, not about my life, my joys, my struggles. You assessed me as a problem to be managed, and you offered the solution your kind always offers: money." I stood, picking up my shabby canvas tote. The contrast between the bag and the power radiating from me was suddenly absurd, almost comical. "True wealth," I said, "isn't in bank accounts. It's in the freedom to be exactly who you are, without costumes or pretense. You have money, Veronica, but you are paupers in every way that matters." I turned to Marcus. "I'm going home. You're welcome to come with me or stay. That's your choice." Then I walked away from the table, through the hushed dining room, past the maitre d' whose icy demeanor had thawed into confusion, out into the cool night air. The doorman rushed to open the door for me, his earlier disdain replaced by instinctive deference. He sensed the shift, even if he didn't understand it. "Your car, madam?" "A taxi, please." He blinked, then whistled for a cab with new urgency. As I slid into the back seat, I glanced once more at the restaurant's glowing facade. Through the window, I could see Marcus standing at the table, facing his in-laws. Simone was still seated, her face in her hands. Veronica was speaking rapidly, gesturing with sharp, angry motions. Then the taxi pulled away, and the scene vanished. The taxi driver was the same one who'd brought me, or perhaps all tired taxi drivers look the same at night. He glanced in the rearview mirror, did a double take. "You're the lady from earlier, from the fancy restaurant." "Yes." "Short dinner." "Long enough." He nodded as if that made perfect sense. We drove in silence for a few blocks before he spoke again. "Everything okay? You seem different." "I am different. I just stopped pretending." He chuckled. "Best thing a person can do. My wife always said, every minute you spend pretending is a minute you steal from yourself." "Your wife was wise." "She was," he said, his voice softening. "Cancer took her 5 years ago, but she left me with enough truth to last the rest of my life." The city flowed past the windows, a river of light and shadow. I felt strangely weightless, as if I'd been carrying something heavy for decades and had only just set it down. My phone buzzed. A text from Marcus. "Mom, I'm coming over. We need to talk." I replied, "I'll be home. Take your time." Then another text, this one from Simone. "I'm so sorry. I didn't know. Please forgive me." I didn't reply. Some things couldn't be fixed with text messages. The taxi arrived at my building. I paid the driver, this time with $100 bill. Keep the change. His eyes widened. Ma'am, this is too. It's exactly enough, I said, for the truth you shared. I entered my building, climbed the 5 flights of stairs, the elevator had been broken for years and I'd never bothered to have it fixed, and let myself into my apartment. It welcomed me with its familiar shabbiness, but tonight it felt different, not like a disguise, but like a choice, my choice. I changed out of the thrift store dress and into my comfortable pajamas. I made tea. I sat by the window, waiting. An hour later, the doorbell rang. Marcus stood in the hallway, still in his expensive suit, but looking somehow diminished in it, like a boy wearing his father's clothes. His eyes were red-rimmed. "Come in," I said. He stepped inside, looking around as if seeing the apartment for the first time. "You own this building?" "Through a trust, yes." He shook his head slowly. "All these years? Why, Mom? Why the secrecy?" I led him to the sofa, handed him a cup of tea. "Sit, I'll explain." And so I told him everything, the early struggles, the climb, the deliberate choice to live modestly, the investments, the properties, the art collection stored in climate-controlled facilities, the dual life not as deception, but as philosophy. I wanted you to have what I didn't, not money, but character, resilience, the knowledge that you could build something from nothing because you'd seen your mother do it. "But you didn't do it from nothing," Marcus said, his voice tight. "You had your salary, your position." "I started from nothing," I corrected gently. "Pregnant, abandoned, with a high school diploma and a minimum wage job. Everything that came after, I built. And yes, once I had resources, I used them wisely, but I never wanted those resources to define you, to make you soft, to make you entitled." Marcus put his head in his hands. "All those times I worried about you, when you were sick and refused to see a specialist because of the cost, when the car broke down and you took 3 buses to work for months. I had excellent insurance, and I owned 3 cars. I just preferred the subway." His eyes looked up, a strange laugh escaping him. "It's absurd. It's like something from a movie." "Life often is," I agreed. "But Marcus, listen to me. Tonight wasn't about the money. It was about respect. Your in-laws didn't just disrespect me. They disrespected you. They assumed that because you came from simple stock, you were somehow less, that you needed their money, their guidance, their approval." "I know," he whispered. "I felt it. The whole engagement, the wedding, it was always there, the sense that I was lucky to be allowed into their world. And you never told me?" He met my eyes. "I was ashamed that I couldn't provide for Simone the way they could, ashamed that my mother was simple." The word hung between us, charged with new meaning. "I chose simplicity," I said. "There's no shame in that. The shame belongs to those who mistake simplicity for inferiority." We talked for hours. Marcus cried, real, shuddering tears of release and regret. I held him as I hadn't since he was a boy, feeling the weight of his disillusionment, but also the dawning of a new understanding. Dawn was painting the sky pale pink as he finally left, promising to return later with Simone. I didn't sleep. I sat by the window as the city woke, thinking about truth and lies, about masks and faces, about the prisons we build for ourselves with our silences. The next few days passed in a strange limbo. I went to work as usual, led my meetings, made my decisions. The power felt different now, not something to be hidden, but simply a fact, like my height or eye color. On Tuesday, Anya brought me the mail as usual. Among the corporate correspondence was a thick, cream-colored envelope with familiar handwriting, Veronica Beaumont. I opened it at my desk. "Ilara, I am writing because last Saturday's dinner has left me unsettled. While your methods were deceptive and frankly cruel, I have had time to reflect. Franklin and I would like to meet you privately, to clear the air, to discuss how we move forward as a family. We are staying at the Laurentian through the week. Please call to arrange a time. Sincerely, Veronica Beaumont. I read it twice, then filed it in the recycling bin. The tone was telling, still condescending, still positioning herself as the wronged party, seeking reconciliation on her terms. My phone rang. Marcus. Mom, did you get a letter from Veronica? I did. She called me. They want to have lunch, just the four of us, you, me, them, to find a way forward. And what do you want? A pause. I want to never see them again, but Simone, she's struggling. They're her parents. I understand. Tell them I'll meet, but on my terms. Where? My office. Tomorrow at 3. Your office? Marcus sounded surprised. Yes, if they want to understand who I am, they should see where I work. The Valerian International headquarters occupied 50 floors of a midtown skyscraper. My office suite took up the entire 40th floor, with views that stretched to the horizon in 3 directions. When Franklin and Veronica arrived the next day, they were escorted not by a receptionist, but by Anya herself, a subtle power signal that Veronica, at least, would understand. I had them wait in the reception area for precisely 7 minutes before having Anya bring them in. The transformation in their demeanor was immediate and fascinating. Where at the restaurant they had been regal, entitled, they now seemed smaller, almost uncertain. They took in the expanse of my office, the original Rothko on one wall, the floor-to-ceiling windows, the discreet but unmistakable evidence of power. "Ilara," Veronica said, her voice carefully modulated, "thank you for seeing us. Please, sit." I remained behind my desk, not rising. Another signal. They sat in the chairs facing me, lower than my chair, a design choice I'd made specifically for situations like this. Franklin cleared his throat. "We've come to apologize." I waited, saying nothing. Veronica picked up the thread. "Our behavior at dinner was unacceptable. We made assumptions. We were condescending. For that, we're sorry." It was a good apology, as these things go, specific, acknowledging fault, but it rang hollow because I knew its source, not genuine remorse, but recalculation. They weren't sorry for their behavior, they were sorry they'd misjudged their target. "I appreciate the apology," I said evenly. "We also want to understand," Franklin said, gesturing around the office. "All this, why the secrecy? Why pretend to be someone you're not?" I didn't pretend. I am exactly who I've always been, a woman who values substance over show. The difference is that you only recognize substance when it wears certain costumes. Veronica flinched. "That's unfair." "Is it?" I leaned forward. If I had arrived at that restaurant wearing designer clothes, flashing jewelry, talking about my portfolio, you would have treated me differently. Not because I was different, but because you speak only one language, the language of wealth. I chose not to speak that language, and so to you I was invisible, or worse, a problem. "We were trying to protect our daughter," Franklin said defensively. "No," I corrected. "You were trying to control her, and Marcus, and me. You believe money gives you that right." Veronica's composure cracked slightly. "And you? With your hidden wealth, your secrets? What does that give you the right to?" "Nothing," I said. "That's the point. Money doesn't give rights. Only people do." We talked for an hour. Or rather, they talked and I listened as they cycled through denial, anger, bargaining, all the stages of grief for their lost superiority. They offered excuses, their difficult childhoods, their fear of poverty, their desire to give Simone everything they'd lacked. I listened patiently, then said, "Your trauma explains your behavior. It doesn't excuse it." Finally, Veronica asked the question she'd been circling since arriving. What happens now with the family? It depends on you, I said. You can continue to be the people you were at dinner, judgmental, condescending, using money as a weapon, or you can change. And if we change, Franklin asked, then we might have a relationship, a real one, based on mutual respect, not financial calculations. And if we don't, Veronica's voice was tight, then you'll have a very polite, very distant daughter and son-in-law, and you'll never know your grandchildren, if there are any. The threat landed exactly as intended. Veronica paled. For people who valued legacy above all, the thought of being cut off from future generations was the ultimate punishment. We'll change, Franklin said quickly. We can adapt. I don't want adaptation. I want transformation. And that doesn't happen in a day or a week. It happens through consistent choice, every day. I stood, signaling the end of the meeting. I have another appointment. Anya will show you out. They rose, defeated but not broken. At the door, Veronica turned. That night, the check. Franklin's cards were declined. Was that you? I smiled slightly. The restaurant's payment system had a temporary glitch. These things happen. But we all knew the truth. I'd made a call to a banking contact, a small demonstration of power, just to remind them who held the real cards. After they left, I stood at my window, watching the tiny figures on the street below. The confrontation was necessary, but it left me weary. I thought of the taxi driver's words. Every minute you spend pretending is a minute you steal from yourself. For 35 years, I'd been stealing from myself. No more. The changes didn't happen overnight, but they happened. Simone came to see me the following weekend, alone. She arrived at my apartment bearing not expensive gifts, but a homemade pie, awkwardly shaped, with crust that was slightly burnt in places. I made it myself, she said, her voice tentative. I've never really cooked before. We always had staff. I accepted the pie. It's beautiful. We sat at my small kitchen table, drinking tea and eating the imperfect pie. Simone talked, really talked for the first time since I'd known her. She spoke of growing up in gilded cages, of the pressure to be perfect, of the loneliness of being loved for her potential rather than her person. My parents love me, but their love has always been conditional on me being a certain kind of person, the right schools, the right friends, the right career. When I married Marcus, he was wrong on paper, wrong background, wrong career trajectory, wrong connections, but he saw me, the real me. Tears filled her eyes. And I was so ashamed of being ashamed of you. Does that make sense? It makes perfect sense, I said gently. I want to be different. I want to be like you, not the money part, but the integrity part, the part where you know who you are and you don't apologize for it. Then start small. What do you really enjoy? Not what you're supposed to enjoy, but what actually brings you joy. She thought for a long moment, then said, gardening, she said finally, surprised by her own answer. We had a gardener when I was growing up, old Mr. Henderson. He let me help sometimes. I loved the dirt, the growing things, the patience of it. Then garden, I said. I don't know how. Learn. That's the point. And so began Simone's transformation. She started volunteering at a community garden, she took classes, she got dirt under her nails, and didn't immediately run for a manicure. Marcus told me she came home smiling in a way he'd never seen before. Veronica and Franklin's change was slower, more grudging. They started therapy, something they'd previously considered American self-indulgence. They began, tentatively, to ask questions rather than make pronouncements. They visited our apartment for dinner, not at a fancy restaurant, but at my small table, eating food I cooked. "Elara," he began, uncharacteristically hesitant, "I've been reviewing our family's philanthropic efforts. They're inadequate. Token gestures, really. Tax deductions masquerading as charity." I nodded, waiting. "I want to create something substantial, a foundation focused on education for women from backgrounds like yours, single mothers, first-generation students." He paused, meeting my eyes. "I'd like you to co-chair it, not just as a figurehead, as the driving force." "Why?" I asked bluntly. "Because you're the only person I know who understands both worlds, the boardrooms and the realities." He gestured vaguely, unable to name what he meant. "And because I need to learn from you." The foundation we created, the Sterling Beaumont Initiative, launched 6 months later with a $50 million endowment. My condition for involvement was non-negotiable. No ceremonial galas, no naming buildings after ourselves, no self-congratulatory press. The money would go directly to programs, childcare subsidies for night students, textbook funds, mentorship networks. Veronica surprised everyone by becoming our most effective fundraiser, not through traditional channels, but through brutally honest conversations with her wealthy peers. "I tell them about you," she confessed over lunch one day, "about how I judged a woman who could buy and sell me, about how much I missed by seeing only the surface. It makes them uncomfortable, and when people are uncomfortable, they sometimes open their wallets." The foundation's first success story was a woman named Letitia, a 32-year-old mother of 3 working as a hotel housekeeper while studying nursing. We covered her childcare, her uniforms, her transportation. She graduated top of her class and now runs a mobile health clinic in her old neighborhood. At the graduation ceremony, Letitia hugged me tightly. "You changed my life," she whispered. "No," I said, "you changed your life. We just removed some obstacles." At Valerian, my newfound openness about my personal life created unexpected shifts. It began when Anya, my assistant of 15 years, came to me with a proposal. "Miss Sterling," she said, unusually formal, "several junior executives have approached me, women mostly. They've heard rumors about your background. They want to know if you'd consider mentoring them, officially." Thus began the Valerian Women's Leadership Program, my initiative, fully funded by diverting a portion of my annual bonus. We met monthly in my conference room after hours, a diverse group of women at various career stages. I shared not just professional strategies, but personal ones too. How to negotiate salary without apology, how to set boundaries, how to build wealth quietly. One evening, a young vice president named Priya stayed late. "My parents are arranging a marriage for me," she confessed, her voice trembling, "to a man whose family expects me to quit working. They say a wife shouldn't earn more than her husband." "And what do you want?" I asked. "I want this," she gestured around my office. "I want the corner office, the responsibility, the respect." "Then tell them no." "It's not that simple. My family—" "Family," I said gently, "should want your happiness, not your compliance." Priya did refuse the arrangement. Her family temporarily disowned her, but she kept her job, earned a promotion, and a year later met someone who admired her ambition. At their wedding, her father thanked me. "You showed her she had a choice," he said, though his smile was tinged with regret for traditions lost. My openness also changed how I led. I began sharing more of myself in executive meetings, not vulnerabilities, but context. When we discussed factory working conditions in developing countries, I didn't just cite data. I spoke about my early years as a single mother, about choosing between medicine and groceries. The board noticed. Some disapproved. Too emotional, one elderly director grumbled. But productivity increased, employee satisfaction scores rose, and when we faced a hostile takeover attempt from a competitor, our loyalty of our team became our secret weapon. They worked nights, found creative solutions, leaked strategic misinformation, not for bonuses, but because they believed in the culture we'd built. We won, and at the celebration, I announced profit sharing for every employee below the director level. Franklin, who had begun attending some Valerian social events, pulled me aside. "That's $20 million you just gave away," he said, not critically, but curiously. "It'll come back," I said, "in innovation, in loyalty, in people giving their best because they're invested, literally and figuratively." He shook his head, smiling faintly. "I'm still learning from you." With my backing, but not my interference, he opened a small workshop. He hired 2 apprentices from underserved communities, paying them living wages and teaching them the craft. His business grew slowly, sustainably. One evening, he showed me a dining table he'd made from reclaimed oak. "For you," he said, "to replace that wobbly old thing in your apartment." We placed it in my dining area. It barely fit, dominating the space, but it was perfect, solid, beautiful, real. "I finally understand," Marcus said as we shared our first meal at the new table, "why you lived the way you did. It wasn't about the money. It was about keeping what mattered in focus." Simone, growing round with their second child, nodded. "We're teaching Clara values, not valuations. When she points to a fancy car, we talk about engineering. When she sees a big house, we talk about the families inside. We're trying, anyway." "You're succeeding," I said. 5 years after the dinner, we held a different kind of gathering, not at Le Jardin Bleu, but at the community center our foundation had helped build. The occasion was the graduation of our 100th scholarship recipient. The room was packed, students, families, donors, staff. I stood to speak, looking out at the sea of faces. Veronica and Franklin sat in the front row, holding hands, a gesture of affection they'd only recently allowed in public. Marcus and Simone were nearby, Clara squirming between them, a toddler son on Marcus's lap. 5 years ago, I began, I was living a divided life, rich in secret, poor in appearance. I believed I was protecting what mattered by keeping truths separate. I was wrong. I saw Veronica flinch slightly, but she met my gaze. "The greatest cost of our silences isn't what we keep from others, it's what we keep from ourselves. Every untruth, every mask, every performance steals a piece of our integrity until we become strangers to ourselves." I gestured to the graduates. "These women have faced truths far harder than mine, single motherhood, poverty, discrimination, loss, and they chose education anyway. They chose growth anyway. They're here not because they had easy paths, but because they walked hard ones with courage." After the ceremony, an older woman approached me. She wore a simple dress, her hands work-roughened. "My daughter," she said in accented English, "Maria, she graduate today, first in our family." I took her hands. "Congratulations." She studied my face. "They say you were like us once, poor, alone." I was. "Now you rich?" It wasn't a question. "In some ways," I smiled. "My bank account is fuller, but my heart was always full. That's what I didn't understand then. Poverty of spirit is the only true poverty." She nodded slowly. "My Maria, she say she want to help others like you help her. The circle, she say." "The circle," I agreed. Last month, I did something I'd avoided for decades. I opened my financial records completely to my family. Not just the highlights, but the full picture. Net worth statements, property holdings, art collection appraisals, trust funds. We gathered in my apartment, now slightly updated, but still fundamentally the same. The Rothko from my office hung in the living room, a retirement gift from the board. Marcus's table dominated the dining area. Simone's first successful garden harvest, a basket of slightly misshapen tomatoes, sat on the counter. The total is approximately 28 million, I said, watching their faces. Franklin whistled softly. Veronica looked impressed but not surprised. Marcus shook his head, smiling. All from salary? And investments. Compound interest is a powerful force over 40 years. I passed around documents. I'm restructuring everything. The bulk will go into the foundation's endowment, another portion into trust funds for my grandchildren's education, but not their lifestyles. The rest, I looked at Marcus, I'm buying your workshop building. The landlord is selling, and I want you to own it outright, not as a gift, but as an investment in your art, in your vision. Marcus's eyes filled. Mom, I also want you all involved in decisions, how the foundation evolves, how we use what I've built, because it's not my legacy anymore, it's ours, a legacy of truth, not secrecy. We talked for hours about values versus valuables, about what wealth means when stripped of status, about the responsibility that comes with resources. At one point, Clara, now 5, climbed into my lap. Grandma, are we rich? The adults fell silent, waiting for my answer. I kissed her forehead. We have enough, sweetheart, and we share. That's the best kind of rich. She considered this, then asked, Can we share cookies? We baked cookies together, all of us crowded into my small kitchen, flour on the floor, laughter in the air, truth between us. No masks, no performances, just people, flawed and growing, bound not by blood alone, but by chosen understanding. This morning I woke early as always. The city was quiet, dawn just brushing the skyline with pale gold. I made coffee, sat by my window, and watched the delivery trucks begin their routes, the early shift workers trudging to buses, the city stirring to life. My phone showed a calendar full of meetings, a board presentation, a foundation strategy session, a lunch with a senator advocating for childcare reform. Power still flowed through my days, but differently now, not as something to conceal, but as a tool to wield with intention. Later, I'll meet Veronica for our weekly walk in the park. She's become an avid bird watcher of all things. They don't care about my net worth, she told me once, laughing at herself. They just want breadcrumbs. Franklin will join us for lunch at a diner he's discovered. Best pancakes in the city, and they cost $6. He still wears his Patek Philippe, but now he also wears a friendship bracelet Clara made him. Marcus will stop by the office with new sketches for a furniture line. He's experimenting with sustainable materials, partnering with environmental scientists. Form and function and ethics, he says. That's the trifecta. Simone will video call from the community garden, showing me the first sprouts of the season. Her blog has become a book deal, but she's donating half the advance to urban farming initiatives. And tonight, we'll all gather for dinner at my apartment around Marcus's table. The meal will be simple, the conversation will be real, the love will be undeniable. The journey from that fateful dinner at Le Jardin Bleu hasn't been linear. There have been setbacks, old habits resurfacing, misunderstandings, moments when the pull of pretense threatened to drag us back. Veronica still sometimes slips into condescension when nervous. Franklin occasionally tries to solve emotional problems with financial solutions. I sometimes catch myself calculating risks when I should simply feel. But we're trying, and in the trying, we're becoming. The greatest liberation of speaking my truth wasn't the power it gave me over others, it was the power it returned to me over myself. To be integrated, whole, no longer divided between the executive and the mother, the rich and the modest, the powerful and the simple. I am all these things, not in succession, not in compartments, but simultaneously. The woman who signs million-dollar contracts and clips coupons, the woman who owns a Rothko and buys thrift store dresses, the commands boardrooms and bakes cookies with her granddaughter. The masks are gone. The silences are broken. The truth, in all its complicated, messy, beautiful entirety, is spoken. And in that speaking, we have built something more valuable than any portfolio, a family not of perfection, but of authenticity, not of flawless surfaces, but of repaired cracks that let the light through differently, more interestingly. The taxi driver from that long ago night was right. Every minute we spend pretending is a minute we steal from ourselves. I've stopped stealing. We all have. And in that honesty, we have found the only wealth that truly matters, the freedom to be exactly who we are, together.